There are books full of great writing that don't have very good stories. Read sometimes for the story. Don't be like the book snobs who won't do that. Read sometimes for the words, the language. Don't be like the play it safers who won't do that. But when you find a book that has both a good story and good words, treasure that book. Stephen King. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Szymanski. And I guess that's a quote by Stephen King, but it's uncharacteristically clunkily written. That was hard to read. But he is on point here, though. All right, if you're loving the story of your audiobook, don't stop listening on the principle that you find the writing mediocre. Bad writing is one thing, but mediocre just means average. You can't expect every book ever to have godlike prose. There's a snobbish subset of people that really think like this, and when you think about it, it's super elitist, right? Don't get me wrong, I love, beautiful writing, that type of book that has that poetic, flowery writing style. Like, I think I just like a good story even more. Regular contributor Sara Hillis is here today. She's joining us for a talk about the Audies, which happened on March 6th, not too long ago. But what's your take on this like beautiful writing, or this like snobbishness over the quality of writing in a book?
Well, just a point, the Audies actually happened on March 4th, just to let you know. But that was
They didn't happen twice, to be clear. They only happened once.
Yeah, it was a week ago as we're recording this. So first of all, I would challenge you to say that good writing isn't always flowery, poetic, or in that vein. Good writing is simply clear and adds to the enjoyment of the story.
Or it serves what the book is trying to do.
Yeah, it's the appropriate language at the appropriate time. And I also didn't find that quote very clunky, but that's just me.
There's so many sentences, like use commas. I don't know. I'm not impressed, Steven.
No, don't use commas. That's wrong. Too many commas. He loves the elements of style, okay? And they don't like commas very much.
See, I like that John Steinbeck style of writing where he just goes on, where he says and like 10 times. And the fish and the sea and the waves and the forest and the sand were all in tune, that type of thing.
Right. So yeah, as long as the story draws me in, I'll keep reading it. I'll get a little annoyed at some of the choices that the author might make sometimes. But as long as the story works for me, I will read it. I'm not too snobby about the writing, although for me, if the story draws me in, I feel that the writing's pretty okay because it's drawing me in, right? Like if it doesn't draw me in, then I think the writing isn't doing its job, I guess.
The writing has to be at a certain threshold of quality to make the story good in the first place, to be able to tell it, right? Because a story isn't just a set of facts and plot points. It's the way it's told that brings it to life.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've read some books that are kind of the opposite, where there's like beautiful writing and you can just appreciate it for its own sake. I thought Moby Dick by Herman Melville was kind of like that.
Oh, look, 104 pages about whales. Yay!
But it's written beautifully. It's also a bunch of fake made up science. Like, you just made stuff up about whales. Like, if you think you're learning about whale anatomy, you're not. Like, it's literally fake news published in the 1800s.
Yeah.
But it's done beautifully.
It's wonderful writing. Yeah.
A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin. That's the series that the Game of Thrones series is based off of. The writing is super dry. It's not particularly inspiring, but the story is amazing and the character development is great. So it's kind of like the polar opposite of Moby Dick, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel. I think that style of that book is almost more reporting or something. Like it's
reporting.
It's not sort of meant. It's not sort of meant to be an epic poem exactly, because he's sort of setting against that backdrop of epic poems and songs the reality of life in this fantasy world, right? That's what he's going for. So I will still defend it.
Yeah, the world is dark and gritty. It's kind of reflected in the writing. It's just super matter of fact in a way that a lot of the characters in that book are very matter of fact, right? But Sarah, let's move on from the written word on the page to the spoken word. The Audies took place on March 4th. That's the 30th time that they happened, so they had some special significance, quite a lot of, retrospectives on the industry and what it used to be like in, 30 years ago in the 90s when people were getting audiobooks on cassettes and stuff like that. Pretty big deal, especially when you look at socials on Instagram and Reddit and online communities. A lot of people paying attention to the Audies nowadays. I know you're a big fan. We talked about it last year as well. What was it like this year?
This year, it was interesting for many reasons. It gets live streamed on YouTube, so it's not a professionally filmed event by any sense. It's an industry event. You just get to watch it happen as it happens. And the cool parts of that I found that were really cool were some memory lane videos of people, and I don't know who was who because, of course, there was no description because I wouldn't really expect that. It would be great, but there's no description on the videos. So, but people were talking about how it was, back in the day, like in the 80s, a lot of the publishers were using their audio arms, their burgeoning audio arms, to do like abridgments because they figured this is what people would want. They'd want an abridgment of a book because like they'd read they wanted the people to read their actual book that they published in full. So the audio books were like meant as an addition or a condensed version on your road trip or something like that kind of deal. And then there was like recorded books was doing full ones, but that not too many were. Plus there were a lot of cassettes. It would make it cost a lot of money to buy them. So they didn't want people to buy them.
Right, you'd buy like a set of cassettes for a long book. There would be like 4 cassettes where you'd have to flip each one.
Yeah, even more than that. Like for a long
Wow.
book, they only used 2-sided cassettes, right? Like in the blindness space, it was 4. They used all 4 tracks of the cassette, so it was only mono. But anyway, that's technical. But like I remember buying CDs of things like that were 12 or 13 CDs long.
Wow.
And they were like $100 or $80 or something. Like there were a lot of money to buy that. And so finally they decided to switch more to doing full books because people were starting to buy audiobooks and they were like, we want the full book, and so they're like, okay, fine. So someone said, one time I had to abridge a 250,000 word Stephen King novel down to 50,000 words. And you could tell that she was like, oh, I can't believe I did that,
That's sacrilegious. Imagine doing that to a movie. You would never. It would make no sense. I bet that abridgment was terrible.
It was most of them were. I actually read a 4 cassette abridgment of your Moby Dick. It was just kind of highlights, like special passages.
What's the point?
And I was like, oh my gosh, that's stupid. Anyway, so and then another person said, remember, end of side 1. Please turn your cassette over to continue. I want that carved on my tombstone, because he used to say it all the time, right? So
I've heard that in digitalized versions of audiobooks that I guess were originally recorded on cassettes.
Yeah, it's fun. And they talked about, having to splice tapes with a razor blade and exactly where you had to edit. And that sounded really amazingly horrible to do, but that's what they did back in the day. And yeah, so those were fun. I like those videos. The actual awards were cool, except interestingly, while they had a recorded list of the nominations and they had actual narrators presenting the awards and telling you all about what the awards were about, they didn't announce the winners. They showed them on like PowerPoint slides or what have you. So the audience could see them and the YouTube people could see them. That could watch on YouTube. I could only listen, right? So it was really funny because on the website, the Gallup website pointed out, well, Pier 60 in New York is an accessible place, and if you need any accessible things, let us know, and we'll help you out or whatever. And they were saying we're all inclusive and it's great, and then they didn't announce the winners aloud, which was just amazing because it's an audiobook awards ceremony.
Right, you had a bunch of professional narrators, and they're just like, no, we don't want to hear any voices. Keep it silent for once.
Only for the names of the winners.
So they
so
did announce the candidates, just not the actual winner.
yeah, they had like pre-recorded,
That's
lovely
ridiculous.
narrated lists of nominees, and then they didn't announce the. Everybody just started clapping, and it was, oh, okay, somebody
That must have been
won.
interesting for you.
It was interesting. I was like, ooh, let's guess by what the applause was like.
Or
Who might
did
have
they
won.
give a speech afterwards?
Most of them didn't, and that's usual. Most of them they don't. They have four ones where you get to give a speech, but most of them just stand up and are recognized, and someone hands them their thing, their award or whatever. So that's usually how that goes.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that was a weird little accessibility fail on their part. Uh,
Can you explain something to me? I never quite understood this about the Audies. So there are awards that are very clearly meant to go to narrators, like fiction narrator of the year, nonfiction narrator of the year, and then there's individual categories like fantasy and sci-fi and history, which are awarded to the author, at least
the
to the author
publisher.
of the publisher. Okay, so it
It's the
doesn't go to the
publisher.
narrator; it goes to the publisher.
Yeah,
That's so
because it's a
strange.
publisher. No, it's not. It's a publishing award. I mean, the Audies are a publishing association award.
Okay, but okay, so let me find you an example. Come Together by Emily Nagoski won the business slash personal development category. That goes to the publisher, but presumably that book is narrated by one person. At an audiobook award show, it doesn't go to the narrator, it goes to the publisher. I
It
guess it's like the
goes.
full
Yeah,
package. I'm
it's the full.
confused.
It's the. They're awarding. Okay, they're awarding most of these categories. Like you put your books up for nomination as a publisher, and then they get shortlisted, and then they get awarded to the publisher for winning, for what they did on that audiobook, like producing it or packaging it. Like it's a publisher's event. Like that's what it is. It's
The
by
fact
the.
that you have to explain it like that makes me say that the communication here isn't super clear. I don't know. To me, it feels like I should go to the narrator. It's an audiobook convention. Like,
No, it's an industry. It's an. I don't have a problem with this one. You're the only one that seems to have a problem with this one
the
here.
only one. Okay, you guys are
This-
going to need to let me know if I'm alone on this in the comments. Leave a message in the comments. Am I wrong or is Sarah on the
So
right
it
here?
lists what it does is it lists the book, it lists the author, the narrator, and the publisher.
So it's an award to all three.
Kind
But
of, but
ultimately, it's going to go in the publisher's office.
yeah.
You don't sound convinced.
No, that's it. I'm saying that's how it works.
At the Oscars, when a movie wins an award, it goes to the individual people.
I know.
For the most part, right? Like
Yeah.
sound design goes to like the sound director. Best director goes to the friggin' director. Anyways, guys,
Yeah.
we're lingering on this.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to be the tiebreaker here. Why don't we get into some of the actual winners? Because it's always a great way to find book recommendations to check out the top audiobooks of the previous year. So these are books that were published in 2024. What was the audiobook of the year? Because that's probably one of the three big prestigious awards at this one.
The audiobook of the year was My Name is Barbara by Barbara Streisand. And that's how you pronounce her name. You don't pronounce it any other way. She makes it clear to tell you that's how you pronounce her name. Streisand, right? She This is a huge book, and it's not even her whole life. It's like, I don't know, it's like 50 hours or something.
Jeez.
She wrote it with people, She narrated it. There's music in there from her career. And so yeah, it won for like innovation and crazy hard work that everybody put into it. You could tell she didn't accept it. It was, again, one of the publishing representatives that accepted it, which is fine because it's a publisher award. It's a publishing award.
She wrote it and narrated it. How did she not get the award as a person?
No! It's a publisher's award. It's a publisher's convention. That is who awards it. So it's meant to honor, yes, some of the narrators get awards, but most of it is about the publishers, and it's a mutual admiration society kind of event. That's what it's meant for. So the person from PRH or whoever, Pink Penguin, I'm not sure who it was, can't remember now, but the person came up and you could tell that they had done so much work on this book, and they were sort of like, it was really amazing, but we're also glad it's finished.
Yeah, 50 hours of narration is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
Also, shout out to the person who edited that thing.
Yeah.
Good Lord, that's a lot of audio to edit. But Barbara Streisand is one of those interesting people that feels like she needs to have written a memoir. One, because she's she's older. She's in like her late 70s, I think maybe early 80s. I think it's safe to say now's the time to release a memoir. And she was an interesting public figure because she was kind of seen as like the Adele of her time, like before that was even a thing. Unbelievable singer that was kind of redefined what it meant to be a celebrity, where you didn't have to be glamorized. She was approachable and authentic in a way that not a lot of other celebrities of her time were, especially female singers and actors that really lean into that glamorization, that like idea of perfection, which I think in large part was that she wasn't conventionally pretty, and she did not care at all about that. She just pushed forward for creative liberties in her contracts. She accepted less money to have more creative liberties in her contract. She was unapologetically herself. And you can see that her style was very influential in a lot of pop singers in the years to come, right? I think about, this is going to sound like I'm taking a dig at people, but like Ariana Grande, Katy Perry, Taylor Swift, they might as well all be the same person, because like the way they present themselves is so similar. This idea of perfection, right? It's not realistic. Barbara Streisand was the exact opposite. And she had so many other reasons
mail
to be.
about this, I think.
That's fine. If we're hearing from you, then we're doing something right. All that to say, I think that she's the type of person that deserves a memoir, and there's a reason why I got one of the best audiobooks. Well, the best audiobook of the year, according to the Audies. It sold super well too.
Yeah.
What are the categories you want to highlight?
Well, we've got let's see. Well, audio drama is one of my personal. I always like to check that one out. Of course, 1984, the adaptation that you've done on this show back in like May or somewhere like that, of 2024. That one, it was an Audible Studios drama, and it was really amazingly well done. And I think that absolutely deserves the audio drama award.
Shout out 1984 Audible's version. The production was unbelievable, and these full cast productions with sound effects are kind of hit or miss in my opinion. When they're done badly, they're very cheesy and clunky. This one was perfection with really good acting. It had people like Tom Hardy, just to name one of them. It was I forget the name, the guy who played Spider-Man. Jeez, I forgot his name. But the performance
Don't ask me.
the performances were amazing, and the audio editing was next level. For any audiophile out there, just for the production value alone, I recommend it. But also, it's 1984. Has this book not been at any point, has this book been more relevant? I don't think so.
Yeah. And what else can I think of? There's lots of good ones. The judge's choice was horror this year. So horror doesn't get its own category typically, which is interesting to me. So every year the judges have a category that they highlight, and this time it was horror. And this might be a prelude to having it be its own. It's like the Olympic test sports, it might get in next year. We don't know. But this was this was Bury Your Gaze, Gays, by Chuck Tingle, which I know got a whole lot of press. I haven't read it, I must admit, but I know it got a whole lot of press. So it's great. There's lots of amazing recommendations in these ones for sure.
We're going to leave a link in the description for the podcast and the YouTube video to go and check out the full list of winners. I also want to shout out the best fiction narrator was, of course, our Julia Whalen for The Women by Kristen Hanna. We reviewed that book on the show. When Julia Whalen narrates, she goes all out. She's not the type of narrator to give, you might call it a straight read. No, like sometimes she screams into the microphone. And when there's
Mm-hmm.
a character having a tantrum or, crying, like she's going all out. She is acting this thing out and being every single character. She goes all out. And there's going to be a weird accolade. Female narrator with the best man voice.
Yeah.
Shout out the erotica section. I can't believe this was a thing. It went to The Lawyer by Marnie Mann. Marnie Mann is the author, not the narrator, although I think that a narrator does a lot of heavy lifting in this one. Let me read you the synopsis of this one, just because I can. I'm not the type of girl who picks up a man on a rooftop bar. Not the kind of girl who lets a man's hands roam my body. I'm never the girl who has hours worth of O's from a smoking hot one-night stand. But Dominic makes it so easy to say yes. That's The Lawyer by Marnie
Oh
Mann.
my God. Okay. Yeah, erotica's been around for ages in the Audies. It's there.
Julia Whalen is also an author, and she wrote a book called Thanks for Listening. And it has to do with audiobook narrators and the subculture of audiobook erotica fans and how they become like obsessed with these like dudes with like really sexy voices reading erotica, and they become like super fans and stuff. Super fun book.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much wraps up all we want to say about the Audies. Looking forward to the ones in 2025. Again, check out the full list of winners that I'm going to be linking in the description below. Stephen King published Insomnia back in 1994, and a friend described it to me as the story of an old guy's descent into madness after he can't sleep anymore after the death of his wife. It also apparently has a sneaky tie-in to his Dark Tower series, which is unexpected. Regular contributor Sara Hillis read this one. And Sarah, I need your help because I checked out reviews and comments about this one, Insomnia by Stephen King, and people say it's super weird. It has fairy-like creatures called bald doctors for some reason. It gets into metaphysical themes and gets unexpectedly political. This sounds like nonsense. Like, what even is this book?
Well, okay. It's a book about a guy who has just lost his wife due to brain cancer. He's just about 70, and he's learning what it's like to be an old guy in a town of Derry. Of course, Derry's in other books by Stephen King. And so he ends up like waking up earlier and earlier every day. And he's not sure why. And then all of a sudden he starts seeing like auras around people and things. And in the midst of all this, there's a plot involving a neighbor of his who becomes this rabid, like almost conspiracy theory level anti-abortionist. And it beats up his wife because she signed a petition for the other side kind of thing. And he's not an abusive guy at all, like in general. So this is new for him. So he's figuring out, why is this happening? And he realizes there's these, interdimensional beings who, yes, have some connection to the Dark Tower. And they look like little bald guys, and they look a little like doctors because they kind of wear white uniforms. So he calls them bald doctors, like, because that's his name for them. Like, he has to make up a name for who these weirdos are that he can see, because the auras it's another level of perception that they've sort of, as you find out, they sort of tweaked him so he could start seeing this stuff, so he could go on a quest and stop the bad thing that was going to happen, kind of deal. It's just one of those kind of books. It's really about, there's a bad thing going to happen, we're going to tell you about it, you have to go help stop it, because you just have to, because it's your fate to do so, kind of deal. It's one of those sorts of books. And yeah, it might be weird. I enjoy those kind of books, so like, it was fun. I just found it fun. And I found what I really loved about it, and what I love about most Stephen King, is that there's a real sense of humanity in these books. He meets a woman, well, they've been neighbors, and they end up really falling in love with each other. They both lost their spouses, and they realize they have an affinity for each other, and he realizes he's underestimated her as a woman. He thought she was just this sort of gossip kind of, vacuous kind of woman. She's really intelligent, but she kind of had to put on that mask so other people would sort of let her be in their company almost. If she was too intelligent, they'd kick her out kind of deal. So it's a really neat story, and most of his stories are that way. I read them for the humanity. I also don't have a problem with the weird stuff because Stephen King has a way, and if you really read it carefully, he brings you into his world. He just twists it and twists reality until you're in this hall of mirrors, and it's just awesome. Like I love when he does that. He'll bring you right in there, and you'll believe it, while you're reading the book. Like, you're there.
There's not that many people who haven't read a Stephen King book anymore, but a lot of people have only read one or two. How would you describe his style? And I asked that because it was interesting the way you described that he still touches on the humanity, which is not something you would expect from Stephen King, a horror writer.
Yeah, he loved the 50s horror comics, so there's always going to be some element of just ridiculous gore and craziness in the book. There's always these huge climactic scenes that are just like, oh, look, he cut off his ear and then he ate it, or weird things like
which
that.
Like, it's gonna sound messed up, but that's kind of fun,
Yeah, but he also reads a whole lot. He observes a whole lot about life, and his characters, I'd say they've it's deepened over the years, probably, like anybody's writing process. His characters are very well drawn for the most part, and at least the main ones are. And his style is I would say very relatable prose, I guess, for the most part. Sometimes it gets a little more highfalutin when it has to, when it's describing really crazy stuff or interesting stuff. But it's like people are people. They have real dialogue. They use a lot of curse words, admittedly. Some people have objected to that, but Stephen's like, well, that's how my characters talk. That's what he says. So,
yeah, well, all the pearl clutching aside, I find his writing almost like blue collar. It's unpretentious. He talks like people talk. Like I forget in one book, but there was a passage I really liked where he talked about it was in On Writing, where it's his like personal memoir and kind of an essay on the craft of creative writing, fiction writing.
Yeah.
And he describes when he was like back in his peak alcoholic days and how he realized he was an alcoholic. And he describes like an empty beer can in the recycling bin as a dead soldier. And he went to go add one more to the bin. I'm like, who calls an empty beer can a dead soldier?
Well, it's a cliche, but that's okay.
It's a cliche. I love it.
It's a cliche, but
that's how people talk. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's great that way. He can actually adopt a person's voice. Like if you take Dolores Claiborne, it's Dolores's discussion with it's a cassette or a transcript of a cassette that they make when she's making her statement, and it's written in like Yankee dialect, and it's written like you forget that Stephen King wrote this book. It's Dolores Claiborne. Like that's
impressive.
It's great. Like it's really great.
All right, that's Insomnia by Stephen King. Sara Hillis, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
That's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. AMI Audiobook Review airs weekends at 1 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio and repeats every 6 hours. But we also make ourselves easy to find. We're on all the big podcasting platforms, and that includes YouTube. You can email us at audiobookrareview@ami.ca for any feedback you might have. Follow our Instagram at AMI Audiobook Review. That's at AMI Audiobook Review. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. Always appreciate your participation. I'm Jacob Szymanski. This was AMI Audiobook Review. Have a good one.